Welcome everyone to the Call to Defend Bible Study / class. And so in this video series, you're going to be seeing some of the content we've already gone over in some of our other videos, but this is where we're going into a deeper dive. There'll be two versions of this video in theory. We're waiting to get further feedback from our group and what they're looking to do with this. And on one hand, you'll be getting around this time that you're getting right now on YouTube, the full lecture version of the content. So this will be the edited version of what happens in the in-person Bible study that's taking place. The second version that we hope to post, as once we get approval from the rest of the group, is to have the group setting where you can see the full discussion that's being had amongst the group itself within these Bible studies. As you can see on the screen, we'll be looking at today the Son of Man, the claim of Jesus, specifically looking at the Caiaphas discussion. This is when Jesus is on trial before Caiaphas, and they have this discussion about who he is and the claims that the Pharisees have to bring in the Sanhedrin to try and provide a good reason for Jesus to be crucified. And so we won't be looking at every version of the Son of Man discussion. We'll just be looking at specific ones that deal with the Caiaphas situation. So it'll be 3 passages in the Synoptic Gospels. And then also looking at the Daniel 7 passage. There are other passages that tie into this as well, but we're looking specifically at Daniel 7, as well as some ancient Near Eastern Jewish writings and New Testament, again with Matthew 26 and the book of Revelation. As you can see, if you are in my group, you have access to this per your Remind chat that the notes are posted there for you. If you are joining us, though, online, you'll see that in the description, there's a link to where you can get the notes for yourself as well. And I encourage you to use those as they go a little more in depth, not super much more in depth, but a little more in depth than the presentation goes. So we're going to be looking at the presentation with New Testament references by Jesus beginning. We see here is that with the New Testament records, the phrase Son of Man appears over 30 times. Matthew, Mark, Luke, Acts, Revelation, and the book of John. Like I said, we're going to be focusing specifically on the 3 synoptic gospels because John's scene with Caiaphas doesn't really pop up. You have the scene just before that, and then you get a reference to it. But the actual discussion that really takes place is found in the 3 synoptics. And then the book of Acts will have another discussion when he ascends. That doesn't quite tie in the Son of Man, but it has a similar image, and then it uses the Son of Man reference later on in the book. And then Revelation has a few mentions of the Son of Man. In fact, 2 specifically, one being found in chapter 1. So right from the get-go, we get Daniel 7's language appearing. And Jesus uses this title for himself more than any other title. A lot of people attribute other titles to him. This is the title that he claims for himself. And it's really interesting that he does this because it's his title that he's claiming. You would think that he would claim the Christ title like the apostles attached to him, but he doesn't claim that one as much. He claims the Son of Man title specifically. And so this is going to be a really interesting one to see how this all plays out. So if you've seen on our channel, we have a shorter version that we're going to be doing, which is when we talk about the cloud writer, but we're doing this a little more in depth here. So beginning with Luke, as you can see here, and when day came, the council of elders of the people gathered, both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their Sanhedrin, saying, "If you are the Christ, tell us." But he said to them, "If I tell you, you will never believe, and if I ask you, you will never answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God." So they all said, "Are you then the Son of God?" And he said to them, "You say that I am." And they said, Why do we have need of further testimony? For we ourselves have heard it from his mouth." And so what we have here is a little bit of information from the book of Luke. We don't get a ton of information, but we get the reference of the Son of Man. We get this mention that he'll be seated at the right hand of the power of God. And then we get the question from the Sanhedrin of, is he the Son of God? And then he says, "You say that I am." But then they go on and they say, "What further do we need of this testimony? For we ourselves have heard it from his mouth." Not much information is given with this passage, apart from Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power of God, and that he claims to be the Son of God. But is this really news for Jesus? Not so much. Like, this is something he pretty much has stated several times. But let's keep going. There's other passages, as you see the synoptics, that kind of allude to more information. The book of Mark provides, but he was silent and did not reply anything. Again, the high priest asked him and said to him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" And Jesus said, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven." The high priest tore his clothes and said, "What further need do we have of witness? You've heard blasphemy. What do you think?" And they all condemned him as deserving death. So this is also interesting because we just before in Luke get this little bit of information. If you notice, we're going backwards with the synoptics. I'm doing that on purpose because with each one we get a little bit more information. More and more details are revealed about the discussion that's had and the things that Jesus states. And they're doing this because the Jewish authors are making a very specific point about what Jesus states. They're driving on this point of the Son of Man. Whereas Luke, where he's writing to Gentiles, he's not driving on that point as much. And so we get here this whole Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power. We saw this before. But then it says, "coming with the clouds of heaven." So we get more from what Jesus said. But then we also have more with what the Sanhedrin does. We have Caiaphas, the high priest, tore his clothes and said, "What further do we need of witness? You have heard the blasphemy." This is not just mere disagreement that we find in Luke. This is something even greater, a greater weight on the issue of this claim we have in Matthew. But Jesus was silent. Why was he silent? Because they were, all this time before, were making false claims about him. And now he's there, and he's been silent because he's watching the claims to destroy themselves. And they recognize the failure of these claims. But he still lets it slide and go by because he doesn't choose to speak until a very specific moment. And that's when the questions are asked. "I put you under oath by the living God that you tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "You have said it, but I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven." The high priest tore his robe, saying, "He is blasphemed. What further do we need of witness?" And we get the story from here. They scream blasphemy. They tear his clothes, and they sentence him, saying that he deserves death. The question that we usually need to ask is, who and what is the Son of Man? And usually when we hear this question, we think of Daniel 7, right? And most time with Daniel 7, we're thinking about Daniel 7:14, where it describes the Son of Man being given this authority and that his kingdom will reign forever and ever. It sounds like a deity claim, but the question is it? Because if we just take that verse by itself, and we ignore the previous context to it that leads up to verse 14, you can see why skeptics will argue that this is just a mere human being exalted. And so we want to know is, who and what is the Son of Man? Is this a deity claim? Is it not a deity claim? Is it an identification claim? Because some people will argue that, okay, we're talking about God can do different things, and we see prophets do crazy things, but we're talking about an identity claim right now, not a ability claim, an identity claim. So we're going to go to Daniel 7, we have verses 9 to 10 to begin with, and it states, "As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat, his clothing as white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened." So what do we see here? I mean, we have the fact there are multiple thrones placed, and the Ancient of Days takes his seat amongst the multitude of thrones. But then it goes on to explain his appearance. He has white clothing that is white as snow. His hair is like a pure wool, so it's white. His throne was fiery, and his wheels were burning fire. So we have a fiery chariot of sorts. That's also a throne. And a stream of fire issued and came out from before him. So we get this really awesome picture of, in the midst of these thrones, is this fiery throne with wheels, and the Ancient of Days is sitting down. Now, post-exilic Jews, these are people after the exile, argued that there are two thrones. The question is, how many thrones are there? So they're going to argue that there are two, one for Yahweh and one for King David. And I'll explain more why they come to that conclusion in a minute. But some scholars suggest that this is for the divine council. All right, so we're dealing first with the fact that there are multiple thrones. Is the thrones meant for two people or for a multitude of people? Because it would imply that if there are multiple thrones, then multiple people are going to be sitting in those thrones. One is already filled, but we know there's more. The question is how many, and we don't really know. We can only inference based on the things here. So on one hand, we could argue that there are just two, one for the Son of Man figure and one for the Ancient Days. Or there could be a multitude, and this is a divine throne room scene, which, like the other divine throne room scenes, would involve the divine council. And we'll have a class/Bible study going over that later. So if you're curious about that, I encourage you to just be patient and wait for that content to come out. But if not, if you're wanting to jump in sooner, I recommend reading The Unseen Realm by Michael Heiser, as he provides a great introduction, or Supernatural by Michael Heiser. Both provide a great introduction for those who are wanting to get into this topic. But like I said, some scholars would argue that this is for the divine council based on other Old Testament texts. Some just suggest that these are for the saints based on Revelation 20, verse 4. However, we don't really know if this is for the saints, considering that's a much later passage. It doesn't mean that it can't be, but given the fact that we don't have enough evidence to really, in the Old Testament, to come to that understanding, and since most of the time the people believe that they go to Sheol, we would have rather a lesser time recognizing that this is perhaps saints. Now, yes, he's having a vision about a future event, but we're still got to recognize that there's accommodation with images, visions, and language that is used in a way that people would understand at the time. And Daniel most likely either saw two, and therefore there was one for the Son of Man, one for the Ancient Days, or it was for the divine council, with Yahweh being at the center, because he is the one who rules as the uncreated Elohim, the only one who is truly God. But that is for another debate. You can read multiple papers on this, and I'll have those recommended below. I'll provide at least two for you guys to go check out. But the Ancient of Days takes a seat among the thrones. And this is going to be interesting, because the Ancient of Days, what's interesting is that we see that this is using very specific, interesting language. Daniel takes place in Babylon, right? So they just got captured, and we had the whole Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego scene, as most people know them by their changed names later on, not their original names, but they had their whole scene. Daniel's now been the one who's been dealing with visions, but now he himself is receiving a vision. And this is in the middle of a vision where he just saw these four great monsters. But now we get this Ancient of Days, and the reason we want to mention the Babylonian context is because what we see here is very similar language to that of the Babylonian god of the pantheon, or the head of the pantheon, because they believed in more of a polytheism, whereas the Jews believed in monotheism, as in there's only one true God, but there are other Elohim. It's a little hard to get into regarding language, but in Canaanite mythology, the head god would be known as El, and he is an aged deity who is addressed by the title Father of Years. In fact, what we have here, as you can see in your notes, in Canaanite mythology, the head of the pantheon is El, an aged deity addressed by the title Father of Years. In the Mesopotamian Anzu myth, the ancient one is a goddess, Mami, whose son defeats the monster Anzu and is granted dominion. And so some commentators also note that these could be signs of wisdom and purity. And the ancient culture believed that the elders had great wisdom, but also that the white signified that which was pure and clean. So the question is, why would this be in the Bible? Why would we have Canaanite language used in the Bible? Why would he appear to Daniel in such a way? Well, in order for Daniel as a prophet to understand what's going on, Yahweh is going to accommodate, even though he's not a material being, but he's going to accommodate his communication to Daniel in a way that Daniel will understand. Daniel's in the middle of Babylon, so his cultural context is Jewish and Babylonian. Appearing like El is not him saying that he is El, but him claiming that El is not really the head of the gods. He is not the God of gods. Yahweh is the God of gods, that no one is greater than he, that Yahweh, while they're, yes, under rule of Babylon, Yahweh is the one who is over all. He is the one that is seated in the fiery chariot. He is the one who sits at the center, that the Ancient of Days comes to, that the thousands of thousands worship and praise. This is going to be language that Yahweh uses to help Daniel understand. He's already confused by what we see with the four beasts. We literally have a passage after that where he asks, what the heck did I just see? Right? But here we have him understanding this, he understands, okay, that's God. And he knows who Yahweh is. He worships Yahweh. So he knows El's not going to be shown a vision, but he knows that Yahweh is coming before him, seated in the throne. We find something similar in other texts as well, such as 1 Enoch. In those days, I saw the head of days, when he seated himself upon the throne of his glory. This is a Jewish text. Yes, many Protestant Christians reject this as inspired text, and I would agree with them on that. But that doesn't mean we can't use it to help us understand Jewish culture and Jewish beliefs. What we see here is that they use similar language in a very similar vision. In those days, I saw the head of days, right? So instead of ancient days, we have the head of days. So this is why Joyce Baldwin, one of the commentators, in fact, she did hers with Tyndale, comments that there were late Jewish traditions that developed the interpretation of God being the source of time based on these phrases, head of days and ancient of days. And this can be confirmed even by Genesis 1 on the first day, which you can see a video we've recently done on that, where God is the one who sets the boundaries of time without there being a sun. That he is the ruler over time. He divides the time boundaries, and day one is him establishing those boundaries. He's establishing time because it will guide man in what they need to do. So we also have that from Collins, the specificity of the parallels, however, requires at the least a common tradition of speculation about the divine throne room. And also that the Qumran, fragments of 1 Enoch, the Book of the Watchers, in which the passage cited appears, is acknowledged to be older than the Book of Daniel. So this is a context that would be also familiar to them. So Daniel already is aware of this other text, perhaps, we can assume that, but he's also aware of the Babylonian context. So now he's receiving this vision that is matching the context he's already having. This is a part of the accommodation and the language to speak to Daniel in the way that he will understand, so that he can write it down in a way that the people will understand. And that he's not asking questions about this Ancient of Days figure, he's asking questions about the beast figures and the relation to what the Son of Man is doing. He knows this is God. We also have 1 Enoch 14:18 through 25 as another text that points to this understanding. But let's continue on, because the question really is about Daniel 7 with the Son of Man. So we have the Ancient of Days scene. We have his throne. We have the thousands serving and 10,000 standing. We have the fact that there's a similar language of Canaanite mythology where he sees the Ancient of Days and he knows that he's seated on the throne. The Yahweh is king. He is the God who rules. There are no other gods who rule. All the gods are subject to him. They are beyond lesser to him because they are weaker. But we see Daniel 7 continue. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient Days, and he was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. So let's begin with what we see here. We have, I saw the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven. So this expression is going to be found in the Dictionary of Deities and Demons. And they write, the expression is thought to reflect the Ugaritic epithet, rider upon the clouds, traditionally given to Baal. And Ugarit and Canaanites, they shared the beliefs about Baal in these texts. We also have in the Zondervan Bible commentary, ancient Near Eastern literature, clouds are often associated with the appearance of deities. They continue on to say that in Canaanite mythology, Baal, the son of El, is described as rider, charioteer of the clouds. After doing battle with and defeating Yam, the sea, he is promised an everlasting kingdom and eternal dominion. So this is also playing a little bit into this cultural background that they have with Babylon. And these are Christian scholars who are pointing this out, actually, and it's really quite fascinating. An example of this can be found from the Ugarit book of poems about Baal, where one passage says, I tell thee, O Prince Baal, I declare, O rider of the clouds. A few verses later, comes Puasan Baal advances the rider of the clouds. So Baal is referred to as the rider of the clouds. But the one that's mentioned before here, as we see at the bottom with Zondervan, we see here, Scarce had his words come from his mouth, his speech and the utterance of his voice from his lips, than he sank under the throne of Prince Yam. But Cathar and Caiaphas answered him, Truly I tell you, O Prince Baal, I tell you, O Prince Baal, I repeat to you, O rider on the clouds, now you must smite your foes, Baal. Now you must smite your foes. Now you must still your enemies. You shall take your everlasting kingdom, your dominion forever and ever. What we get here is that the cloud rider is typically associated with Baal. And this figure of El is associated with this certain image, both of which are being attributed to two different figures here. Michael Heiser comments on this. Old Testament writers were quite familiar with Baal. Baal was the main source of consternation about Israel's propensity towards idolatry. In an effort to make the point that Yahweh, the God of Israel, deserved worship instead of Baal, the biblical writers occasionally pilfered this stock description of Baal as cloud rider and assigned it to Yahweh. And this comes from his book, Unseen Realm. And he goes further into this within his chapters, but he provides some examples as well. And what's going to be interesting is that you'll notice there's a specific character attributed in this way. There is no one like God, O Jeshurun, who rides the heavens to your help with his majesty through the skies. This is from Deuteronomy 33:26. Or how about Psalm 68:32-33? O kingdom of the earth, sing to God, sing praises to the Lord. Salah to him who rides in the heavens, the ancient heavens. Behold, he sends out his voice, his mighty voice. We'll keep going with Psalm 104. Bless the Lord, O my soul. O Lord, my God, you are very great. You are clothed with splendor and majesty, covering yourself with light as with a garment. Stretching out the heavens like a tent, he lays the beams of his chambers on the waters. He makes the clouds his chariot. He rides on the wings of the wind. He makes the messenger winds, his ministers of flaming fire. Or one more. How about Isaiah 19:1? An oracle of Egypt. Look, Yahweh is riding on a swift cloud, and is coming to Egypt, and the idols of Egypt will tremble in front of him, and the heart of Egypt melts in his inner parts. This is fascinating because all these passages, amongst a few others, always attribute the motif of the rider of heavens and the clouds to Yahweh. So instead of Baal, Yahweh takes this title. The biblical authors attribute this to Yahweh, saying Baal is not the rider of the clouds, Yahweh is. El isn't the head of the divine council. El isn't the one who is a ruler in the throne. Yahweh is. The Ancient of Days is. And not only is he the ruler of time, but he's the ruler of everything. He is God. He is the one who's great, not Baal, not El. Except one verse, and that is Daniel 7, the very passage we're looking at right now. And what we see here is that the Ancient of Days is already seated on his throne. In every instance, I mentioned, is attributed to Yahweh, but Yahweh is already on the throne. So this is a great question. Who is the Son of Man figure? And what we see in the Second Temple time period especially is a great deal of questioning and a great deal of trying to guess. People will notice that when you read things like in the Apocrypha, these figures attributed to being the Messiah that clearly aren't. Like they'll say Adam or Gabriel or Michael or Ezekiel, or just a list of people to go through of people that could or could not be the Messiah or this Son of Man figure, is because they're trying to figure out who is this Son of Man, because they'll point out that the term Son of Man really refers to the really boils down to being one like a man. And you have this man who's walking around, and he's up in the clouds doing the very thing that Yahweh only can do. And this is an identification thing. Somehow Yahweh's in a seat, but he's also over here, and he's a man. It's not a vision of him. It's not even just like a manifestation of a man. It is a human. Somehow there's a human Yahweh, and there is Yahweh. Somehow there's this two powers of heaven. Alan Siegel wrote a book, and he's a Jew, a modern-day Jew, and where he traces the discussion as had amongst rabbinic writers. And you see that they really do struggle with that. And it's during the Second Temple, they're trying to guess around. And then really what's interesting, when you read his work, you trace the history of it, is that during the end of the first century, post-Jesus stuff, they completely throw out the idea of the two powers of heaven and try to come up with other answers saying that any belief of the two powers of heaven is a heresy. Never mind the fact that their own text teaches the two powers of heaven, and the ancient Jews believed in the two powers of heaven for a while. So they completely reject this. And it's interesting because it became a great struggle. Zondervan again also comments, in Aramaic and Hebrew, the phrase son of man is simply a common expression to describe someone as something as human or human-like. John C. Collins also comments, one like a human being. Like I said, this is a great struggle. Who is the Son of Man? How is there one who is human, who is doing the very thing that Yahweh can do, who's going to receive this kingdom, is being Yahweh? How is there Yahweh and Yahweh in human form? We keep going, though. This human form, as you mentioned, is given dominion. He's exalted by the Ancient of Days. He is given dominion, glory, and the kingdom is everlasting dominion without passing away or destruction. This Son of Man is not just Yahweh, but he's coming in to be given the keys, basically be given kingship over everything that Yahweh is giving him. So we have Yahweh giving this other Yahweh, this one who is doing what Yahweh does, but yet is distinct from Yahweh. Or in Trinitarian language, the Father is giving the Son the authority and the kingdom to reign over everything. The figure is Yahweh, yet distinct from Yahweh, and as a human is the one who is given all of this, the kingdom, and shall not be destroyed. This is not just an exalted human being. This is a human being who is acting like he is Yahweh, who is Yahweh. So we come back to Matthew 26. What we can see here is Jesus was silent, and the high priest said to him, I put you under oath by the living God that you tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus tell him, you have said it, but I tell you from now on, you'll see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his clothes and saying he has blasphemed. Right? So some people try to argue, okay, well, because they're Jews, they don't believe the Son of Man figure is divine. Yet the high priest here screams blasphemy when Jesus makes this statement. If he was just talking about being an exalted king, priests wouldn't be screaming blasphemy. And the other priests wouldn't be screaming blasphemy. This would not be a problem for them. This would not be an issue. Jesus is identifying himself with Yahweh by identifying himself as the Son of Man. Caiaphas is fully aware, as well as the Sanhedrin, of the two powers of heaven issue. And you see this all throughout the Old Testament. Examples can be found in Exodus, where you have the angel of the Lord, who is called Yahweh in the text. And it says Yahweh tells Moses that to climb the mountain, and Yahweh will be there, and he'll tell you to do X, Y, Z. But Yahweh is telling him to go meet Yahweh. There are two Yahwehs, but they're still both Yahweh. They're Yahweh and yet distinct. This is an issue that they're trying to figure out, and the Son of Man only made it harder. They also have the cloud rider issue. The only person who's ever attributed to riding the clouds is deities. We saw again in the Canaanite religion, in the Ugaritic texts, Baal is riding the clouds, but now we have here Yahweh is riding clouds, and now we have the Son of Man who's doing the very thing Yahweh does, and we know that the Jews, good Jews, ancient Jews, did not worship multiple deities. They only worshipped one. They're also fully aware of Daniel 7 as well as Ezekiel 1, and they're fully aware of the Son of Man issue. Jesus is effectively saying to him, think about it, Caiaphas, not only am I the Christ and not only am I the Son of God, I am the cloud rider. I am Yahweh. I am the ruler of the ancient days who is given dominion to, he is my Father, and we are one. Jesus is identifying himself as Yahweh here. This is the straw that officially broke the camel's back. This entire time, they're trying to find something to use against him, something to say that he deserves death. And here he comes stating that he is Yahweh. I am, and he does it with this cryptic language, but in a way that only Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin would understand, and any of the Jews would understand. We just see this like, oh, wow, this is a great passage, and we understand what it's supposed to mean, but we don't really grasp onto it. I think many Christians understand that Daniel 7 is supposed to be a deity passage of some sort, an identification of some sort, due to what happens here. but they're not doing it because of what the Old Testament already taught beforehand, because the Jews are aware of this. Caiaphas didn't need Matthew to write this for him to understand why this is blasphemous, right? He understood this is blasphemous because of everything that is taught in the Old Testament, because he is a good Jew. He knows his text. He's a good Bible nerd. Well, good, I guess, is not the right term, considering he rejected Jesus as the Son of Man, but he knows what the text says. He knows what it implies. And Jesus knows that, and he's saying, think about it. I've done everything that the Torah and the Tanakh teaches that I would do. I am the Son of Man. I am Yahweh. I am Yahweh in the flesh, and I am going to reign. I am king. And it's a beautiful passage, a beautiful image here. We get more strange information with this, and I'm going to jump to Acts 1 now. What is interesting is that when we look at Acts chapter 1, verse 9, it says, after he said this, he was taken up before their very eyes, and a cloud hid him from their sight. Now, there's nothing here saying the Son of Man, but we see here is that Jesus is, after he spent his 40 days with the apostles, now he ascends, and he goes into the clouds. He's ascending to the throne. He is here ascending to his throne. He is doing what he's saying. He's going before the Father to sit. He is reigning. He is God. Or how about, let's go to Revelation. We get a lot here in Revelation 4 through 20. I'm not going to read all of it here. I encourage you to, though. And if you notice in your notes, there are highlighted verses, and these are ones to help identify the character of the Son of Man, but also to show what he says, so you can see the things that he says and how they tie together. But we see here in these verses is that John uses Daniel 7 as part of the opening to his letter, right? And he describes seeing the Son of Man in the midst of the lampstands of the menorah. Craig Keener states that a usually 7-branched lampstand or menorah was one of the most common symbols for Judaism in synagogues in antiquity. By identifying the churches as lampstands, John claims that Jesus' movement is the true form of Judaism. So you have in the midst of these lampstands, the Son of Man standing there, and these 7 lampstands are also referred to as the 7 churches. So the Son of Man is the one who's in the midst of the churches, and now he's commanding John to write to these churches claiming that he's coming again. And we see later in Revelation 22 where he says, I am coming again. And there's a warning and there's a blessing of what's to come. Jesus is the King. He is the Son of Man. He is God, the second power. He is Yahweh, the Son, second person of the Trinity. He is the Son. This passage should not just be viewed strictly as a deity claim, as is also a kingship part of the whole study of the kingdom of God, but it ties deeply into who Jesus is, who he claims to be, and he claims to be God here. You're going to have skeptics like Alex O'Connor is going to say, well, does Daniel really know that this is God because he's a Jew? But here's the thing. Jews didn't believe that the cloud rider was God in this passage until post-first century, or late first century to post-first century. Before then, they believed that. They believed those who ride in the clouds were associated with deity. They understood who rode the clouds was written about riding the clouds before Yahweh was written about, but then they know that Yahweh was attributed as the one who rides the clouds because he is the true God, not Baal. They also are aware of the throne room scenes, and as we saw with Matthew and Mark and even Luke, they recognize this as a blasphemous claim, as a claim to be the same as Yahweh. So the question of did Daniel believe this? I'm going to argue Daniel did believe this because he knew his text very well. You can see the way he writes, that he's aware of the texts that are going on around him, and he knows of the things prior to that. And he doesn't have a question about the ancient days. He has a question about the 4 beasts, the one who's reigning. It was later rabbinic Jews who were struggling with this. So with Alex assuming this, and then Alex will go on to state, well, we see Jesus attributed with things that he can do, and there's plenty of times where prophets can be assumed that they can do things that God can do. But in his discussion with Fan, Stan rightly points out this is an identification argument, not a what he can do argument. And Jesus identifies himself as the Son of Man who rides the clouds. And the only one who's attributed in the Bible as the rider of the clouds is Yahweh in every passage except one, and that is Daniel 7, where it says there's a Son of Man. If we're good students of the Bible, we'll understand that the one who rides clouds is Yahweh. And now we have a Yahweh who's sitting on the throne, who's waiting for the Son of Man, who is another Yahweh, but is still one with Yahweh, but is distinct, to come before him and to sit on the throne and to reign. We see here that the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. This was the claim that he stakes his life on, the claim that he makes right before the Jews sentence him to Pilate, saying that he should die. And he has this whole discourse with Pilate. And then they scream that he should be crucified. This is a rich and deep passage pointing to the deity of Jesus. Jesus is the cloud rider. He is God. He is the Son of Man, and he is king. He is reigning, and he died to serve. He served for us. He served his Father, and he served us. And now he's on his throne ruling as conqueror because he's ascended to the Father. Jesus is the Son of Man. He is Yahweh. He is God. He is the second person of the Trinity.